Welcome to the 2020 New Testament Challenge. Today we're in 1 Corinthians chapter 10. The Old Testament was written to teach us, that we might learn from it, that it would help us so that we don't make the same mistakes that others did in the past. Now here's the truth. If we do not know our history, we are destined to repeat it. And so Paul gives us instruction about our past. And he says here in chapter 10 that there are things in the past that we need to learn from. There are good things that we need to learn from. The first is that God does give guidance to his people, that God delivers his people, and that God provides for his people. Throughout the Old Testament, this is what we've seen. But if we don't learn from our past, then there are also negative consequences. Here in verse 1, he says, I do not want you to be ignorant of the fact, brothers, that our forefathers were all under the cloud and that they all passed through the sea. They were all baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea, and they all ate the same spiritual food and drank the same spiritual drink, for they drank from the spiritual rock that accompanied them, and that rock was Christ. So here Paul is saying that all of our forefathers experienced the exact same things. Again and again, I circled in my Bible that word all. 4 times he says all of them experienced something. What did they experience? They experienced that of being under the cloud. They experienced going through the sea. They experienced the leadership of Moses. They experienced the fact that they ate the manna, the spiritual bread, and then they had water that came from a rock. All of them experienced God's provision, his guidance, and his deliverance. Nevertheless, it says in verse 5, God was not pleased with most of them, for their bodies were scattered over the desert. In Numbers chapter 13, we read that Moses sent spies into the promised land. And then those spies came back and they gave a good report. But then the people gave a bad report. They said that we can't go into the land because, yes, it does flow with milk and honey, but there's giants in the land and we cannot go in and possess the land. Because of their disbelief, because they did not follow the Lord, then what took place? It says that God was not pleased with most of them. I think that's being very generous. Because every adult under 20 years of age died during a 40-year period. And then Joshua was able to lead the children of those adults into the promised land 40 years later. They needed to learn from their past. Verses 6 through 11, this is what we read. Now, these things occurred as examples to keep us from setting our hearts on evil things as they did. Do not be idolaters, as some of them were. As it is written, the people sat down to eat and drank and got up to indulge in pagan revelry. We should not commit sexual immorality, as some of them did, and in one day 23,000 of them died. We should not test the Lord, as some of them did, and were killed by snakes. And do not grumble, as some of them did, and were killed by the destroying angel. Again, these things happened to them as examples and were written down as warnings for us, on whom the fulfillment of the ages has come. We need to learn from our past. If we don't know our history, we are destined to repeat it. But then he says in the next 2 verses, 12 and 13, so if you think that you are standing firm, be careful that you don't fall. No temptation has seized you except what is common to man, and God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. And when you are tempted, he will also provide a way of escape so that you can stand up under it. Satan will use the same temptations as he always had. He'll use the same temptations that our forefathers experienced. These things are all common to man. But it says that God is faithful. He will always provide a way of escape. So what do we need to do? We need to take God's guidance. We need to take God's deliverance, and we to accept his provision. As we do, we will learn from those that have gone before us, and we will not make their mistakes, but we can be victorious over sin, Satan, and temptation. Thank you for joining the 2020 New Testament Challenge.